If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
Bujan is a blogger on In the Garden with Grandma, which is a website devoted to gardening with children and helping to grow the gardeners of tomorrow. It's a place where families are encouraged to unplug their devices and together plug into Mother Nature instead. Welcome to the program, Jan.
Thank you so much for having me, Holly and Joey, because I've been a listener of your podcast and radio show for the last couple of years, so it's fun to be here with you.
Well, we appreciate you taking time out of your day to share some of your gardening knowledge and wisdom with all of us.
Great.
So how did you, the show is kind of focused today on who influenced us to get into gardening and why, so we'll ask you that question. How did you get into gardening, and talk about how and who influenced you and why you chose to go that route of gardening?
Okay. Well, my answer will probably not surprise you, because I know when I ask gardeners this question, many times the answer is my grandmother. And that surely was the case for me. Now, I come from a long line of gardeners, including my parents and my aunts and uncles. So it really was a strong part of our family's identity. But my biggest influence was my Croatian grandmother. And when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time with her. We called her Majka, which means mother in Croatian, and she was just an amazing woman. Like most other women of that generation, she really did it all. She had a beautiful garden with fruits and vegetables and flowers, and she cooked and she baked, and she either canned or fermented everything that came out of the garden. And I loved going over to her house to play with my sister and brother in the garden. And I guess the word that I want to emphasize here is play, because that is what children love to do. Now, I'm sure I probably, quote unquote, helped in the garden a little bit, but mostly I remember it as a place where I was allowed to play and pretend. And I especially loved to pick things out of the garden. And one special memory I have was when I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and my grandma let me pick a kohlrabi. And she took a really sharp paring knife, and somehow, and you know how difficult this is because you're gardeners, somehow she peeled that kohlrabi in one long, unbroken curl, and she cut it in half, and we shared it right then and there. And to this day, it's one of my favorite veggies from the garden. And many years later, when I became a grandmother, I knew I wanted to garden with my grandkids. And I like to think that things have come sort of full circle, because just the other day, my granddaughter pulled out the last kohlrabi from the spring, and she and I shared it in the garden. So that's sort of a long story, but the most important influence on me was my grandmother.
Well, is there anything that from your childhood, and I'll tell you why I asked this. My grandfather, he just turned 83. He will not eat blackberries. He does not want blackberry pie because he remembers as a child him being forced to pick wash tubs full of blackberries in the summer, and from then on he will never touch a blackberry or a raspberry ever because of that. Is there anything that's traumatic from that type of level in the garden from when you were younger?
I have to be honest with you, there isn't. I do have memories of gagging on eating beets at that age. Now I absolutely adore beets, but there are certain things that my family would fix that I just didn't like to eat. But no, I don't have really any traumatic memories of not touching anything now.
So why do you feel it's so important to have children work in the garden and be part of that?
Oh, wow. Gardening has so many advantages for kids, and I probably could go on and on about this topic, but I'll touch upon a few things. I would say the most important reason to garden with kids is that it gives kids the opportunity to really experience the miracles and the wonder of the natural world. And for many reasons these days, many of our kids are experiencing a disconnection with nature. And there are many people, like you may be familiar with Richard Louv, who wrote the book The Last Child in the Woods. He feels that kids are suffering from the side effects of what he calls nature deficit disorder. And I just think that is so timely at this point in time. Now, the good news is that more and more studies are showing that gardening can help children and all of us, quite honestly, lead better lives and healthier lives. And it can help kids from becoming overweight and even help with anxiety and depression. But, kids are naturally curious about the world, so when you walk outside the door, and if you've got a garden, what are kids going to see? Well, they're going to find seeds, and you know how small those tiny tomato seeds are. You put one of those in the palm of their hand, walk over to the tomato bush, and explain to them that all those tomatoes that you see that we're going to be enjoying came from that one tiny seed. And it's just miraculous. They're going to find lots of bugs. Mostly kids are fascinated by insects. I know my grandkids are. You won't be in a garden for more than 30 seconds before you start noticing things like bees and spiders and butterflies and earthworms and the lightning bugs at night. And if you're lucky, maybe like we did last year, we found a well-camouflaged insect like a praying mantis. And kids are smart. They'll quickly learn to distinguish, if you help them, the good bugs from the bad bugs. And they'll really feel a sense of accomplishment by doing so. And, of course, they're going to see wildlife, rabbits and chipmunks and birds and frogs. They'll understand why you might be putting up chicken wire to keep the bunnies out of the beans, or why you might be putting the cabbage under a row cover to keep them away from the cabbage moth. And you're helping them understand that all these things are related. And eventually, they come to think of themselves as gardeners. And by watching you, your kids will learn how to do all the things that gardeners do. And they're going to be healthier because of it. You and I both know that all this gardening requires plenty of exercise on our part. Produce tastes a lot better when freshly picked. So children who grow up eating homegrown veggies are much more likely to eat them in adolescence and beyond. So I guess you can tell this is a topic I could go on and on about. But if one of your listeners is interested in gardening, but they don't know where to start, there's lots of help and support out there, and they just need to take one step at a time. We don't need to have a perfect garden. We don't need to know everything there is to know about gardening before we can teach kids how to garden. So I always tell parents that children only need a willing grown-up gardener, not a perfect one, to work alongside them. And if we're willing to do that, Mother Nature usually takes care of the rest.
Awesome. I definitely agree. Everyone, especially children, are distracted these days and love their electronic devices. How do you keep them engaged in gardening?
Well, again, that's a timely topic and an important one. Of course, it's important for us to model putting away our devices while we're outside and model for them that getting out in the yard in the fresh air and sunshine is just part of what our family does. But quite honestly, once kids get to elementary school, especially let's say third grade and beyond, this gets more and more challenging. They're using technology in school every day. Their friends are using technology. Now, I'm of the mindset that there can be a good blend of technology with the garden. I mean, how many of us have used the internet to look up why a tomato plant is having a problem, right? You can see the picture and help to identify the cause. But Mother Nature's pretty fascinating and has the ability to capture kids' attention. And so every so often have the kids maybe conduct an experiment outside that uses instruments like a soil thermometer. Do experiments that check to see what kind of soil you have in the garden. Kids like science and like to do experiments, so provide them with the opportunity once or twice a month to do that. If your child has a science fair project to do, see if they might be interested in one that has to do with plants and horticulture. Check with your local garden center or library or CSA to see if they offer children's programming on gardening. My grandkids just finished their second year of an excellent kids garden club that was offered at a local garden center, and they just loved it. It's a way for kids to meet new friends and have another tribe to hang out with kids of similar interests. But we can use technology too. My granddaughter's at the age now where I can hand her my iPhone that still has the old iPhone that has the camera feature and ask her to go around the yard and take some pictures. And I love to see what she comes up with. There are interactive nature and gardening websites for kids that explain something, maybe, let's say, like pollination. There are TV shows about nature that are great resources for us. And so I think there's a way to blend the two together.
So we always have practiced or preached the use what you already have in the garden. And you've got some things. What are some items that you can reuse in the garden, for kids to make gardening easier that you don't have to go spend money on? And if they do, like, break it, it's not a whole lot of loss for you.
Okay, let me think. Well, first of all, kids and water kind of go together like peanut butter and jelly. And so when you're working in the garden with younger children, now I'm talking about, like first grade and under, let's say, watering plants is a great activity, and they will gladly take part in it. But watering cans can be less than kid-friendly. They're heavy. They do require some skill to use without wasting water. They empty quickly, and so you're filling up the watering can more and more, spending your time doing that. Garden hoses kind of fall in the same category. They're kind of unwieldy. So eventually kids get old enough to handle those, but in the meantime, you can do this really cool gardening hack. And there's a 2-minute video on my website, but let me explain to you how to do that. You get a hammer, a small hammer, a nail, and some empty plastic drinking water bottles, anywhere from 12 ounces to, let's say, 1.5 liters. The bigger bottles are for the bigger kids, and the smaller ones for the small kids. So put lids on the bottom, use the nail and hammer, and make about 6 to 10 holes on the lids on the top. And then fill these with water, and now you have a manageable, lightweight watering tool that even toddlers can use. And the water won't pour out all at the same time. They kind of have to squeeze it a little bit to get it to work. And I even use these. They're perfect for watering, let's say, window boxes where you don't want to lift up a heavy watering can, or to do containers around the garden or the patio. And so, again, if that's not clear, just go to my website and watch the little video that tells you how to do that.
That definitely is a great tip. Now, you referred to your website just now. How do people find out more about you and your website, especially to watch that great video?
Okay. Well, my website is called, appropriately enough, In the Garden with Grandma. And Grandma is GRANDMA.com. And it's been up and running since January of this year. It's where you can find my blog and download a growing list of resources that I have on gardening with children. Also, I encourage you listeners to email me with any questions that they might have and let me know what help you might be needing with in the garden. You'll find the link to that to that email on my website. Also, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at In the Garden with Grandma, and I post tips and ideas almost daily about gardening. So that's where you can find me.
Well, Jan, we greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to join Holly and me and share your gardening wisdom with all of us.
Well, I'll tell you, this has been a real treat for me. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for checking out the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener radio show. For more, go to the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for full-length in-studio video and podcast replay of Season 1. Season 2 underway and added weekly. Tweet us at TWVG Show or hashtag TWVG to be part of the program.